Well, good morning,
Good morning.
Karen, Arif. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, Barrington, Seth.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Really good to see all you guys this morning. Man, I was thinking about this service you did Wednesday night, Karen, and just reflecting on the world we're living in right now with so much grief and fear and anger and possibility as well. And when I heard your message, after listening to your message on Wednesday, I was just thinking a lot about tears and about weeping and those really big ugly cries we have sometimes. And I see the title of your sermon about ugly cries, you know, the ones where you go through a whole box of tissues and then some, and you have,
Yep,
more snot and mucus than you can even,
Down your face.
like where did it come from? And it's a wild experience. And so I'm not going to ask you this morning about the big ugly cries you've had, but what I am curious about, and maybe we can spend a minute or two on this, is what do you notice in yourself after you've had one of those big ugly cries?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first thing I noticed, Justin, is that I feel so much better. I feel lighter. I feel like a burden's been lifted. And I also feel like laughing for some reason because I sometimes get a glimpse of my face during the ugly cry. I'm like, who is that? And it's nice to know her every now and then.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, it's a mix of things. Sometimes I have a pretty intense headache after an ugly cry, and also that feeling of lightness and relief, like a dam that has been stuck with logs and boulders has kind of broke free and some stuff has moved on. And there's just a way I can breathe a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely share that sense of lightness. But I also have to say that after a particularly large, ugly cry, I have this moment of like, did anybody see me? Did anybody see me do that? That's just me. And I'm like, I'm like, wow, I was ugly. I was ugly crying. And so there's that sense of like almost having let too much out, right? And kind of like, how do I put myself back together?
I think I feel the same way that it feels outside after a thunderstorm when you come out and it's not gray out anymore but it's kind of like a green gray color and the light's starting to break through, but there's this like the air feels different, right? So my air feels different.
Right.
That's a beautiful image.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. There's this air and this lightness, and I just feel like I'm ready to take radical action. I've gotten all this weight lifted off of me, and I'm ready to go forward.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. And for those of you tuning in right now, I want to assure you, Barrington is parked. He's not zooming in as he drives, so don't worry about him. We're going to get started with our service this morning. I just want to welcome everyone who's been coming in as we've been having a little conversation here as the worship team. We're just delighted you're joining us. Welcome from around the Twin Cities, from around the state, from around the country, from around the world. Welcome families and children and guests and people who have been with us one or two times before. We're just really thrilled that you're here. If you haven't already, you can take a minute to let us know where you're joining us from in the chat box. You can type in a hello and let us know where you're zooming in from. That's always fun and just beautiful to recognize that we're coming from all around this globe that we share. Make sure when you send a message, you have it set to all attendees and panelists. That way everyone will get your message. And also, as a heads up during the service, the chat will be open as we begin and then open during the prayer time and then at the very end of the service. I also want to let you know, if you're new with us, that you are muted. No one can see you, so don't worry about what you look like or what you're doing as you join us for worship this morning. For over 160 years, First Universalist has been alive with the spirit of love and hope, the spirit of giving and receiving and growing together. We are the people who welcome and affirm and protect the light in each human heart, the people who listen deeply to where love is calling us next, and the people who with humility, courage, and compassion act to create a more just world. We do all of these things as a faith community committed to racial justice. This is the path that we travel, and this is the life that we invite you into when you journey with us. This is what you will experience in our worship service this morning. I want to let you know a few things. We are really ramping up for a new church year that will begin in September, and there's a lot happening in the next couple of weeks. I want to make sure you know that church will be closed Monday, August 31st through Labor Day, September 7th. Staff and ministers are not working during this time. We're not answering emails or attending meetings or planning worship or programming. We're really taking this time to rest and restore, to come into the fall church year ready to go and to serve the needs of this community and the wider community. That being said, if you need pastoral care, of course, we are available to you, and you can call the church and you'll be connected. There's a number when you call the church, it'll forward right to a minister who has the care phone, and we'll be able to support you if you're experiencing a pastoral need next week. On Sunday, September 6th, we will not be worshiping at First Universalist as we have done in the past, but we're inviting you to take a virtual road trip if you would like to visit some of our sibling congregations in the Twin Cities. Unitarian Church in St. Paul, you're welcome to join their worship. They've extended a welcome to us. White Bear has extended a welcome to us, and First Unitarian Society has also extended a warm welcome to us. So check out one of our fellow congregations and see what they're up to, and then come back and report on what you've learned and discovered. I also want to remind you that Sunday, September 13th, we are celebrating our annual water communion service in a new way, a virtual way. We're inviting you to submit a photo of yourself, or you and a friend, or you and a family, or you and your pet, whatever it might be. We want a picture of you near water that is sacred or special to you. And you really get to define that. This could be a river or a creek, a pond, a lake, an ocean, a bird feeder, a sprinkler. It's some water in some place that has a special meaning to you. And we would love as many photos as we can get, and we'll create kind of a photo exhibit in our online worship service on the 13th. You can send your photos to communications@firstuniv.org, FIRSTUNIV.org, communications@firstuniv.org. And we'd love to include that in our service on the 13th. And then on Sunday, September 20th, we kick off our new year of virtual religious education for children and youth and families. Registration is now open. And even if you're not sure how or how often your kids will show up online, we know everyone's scrambling to figure out what the fall will look like. Please do sign up so that we know you're here and we have a sense of what the needs are that we can meet as a faith community. You let us know what those needs are that we can try to meet as a faith community. Following the service today, we're offering 2 virtual coffee hours, one for Black, Indigenous, multiracial, and people of color, and another gathering that is open to folks of all identities. If you go to our homepage, click on Sunday Worship for those coffee hour links. And now, dear ones, let us take a moment to gather in this place to see if across these great distances from household to household around the city and state and even the country and world, we might find a shared breath. We might find a shared heartbeat. We might find a space to truly know ourselves as one community. And we can do that by taking 3 deep breaths together, knowing this simple act connects us across time and space. And so as you are ready, I invite you to join me in taking 3 deep breaths to ground into this moment, this time, and to feel that shared breath that holds us all. And so now I invite you to light a candle, to light your chalice, if you have one, or maybe just to bring your attention to the light in your own heart as Ian and Sylvia lead us in our chalice lighting words.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Hello, dear ones. Good morning. Friends, this morning I'm going to tell you a story about a water bearer. Now, a water bearer is someone who travels on foot typically to fetch water from their nearest source and then carries that water all the way back to their own community. Now, this particular water bearer lived in a small village in India, and he served his community as their water bearer for many, many years. He carried his water in 2 big pots, one on each end of a long pole, and hauled it on his back all the way back home every single day. The people of the village loved and honored their water bearer for his work, and they were always so glad to see him return every day. They would greet him with waves and smiles and thank yous for his service. But one day, the water bearer realized that one of his pots Oh no! I'm back! I'm so sorry, I have no idea where I left you. But I'm gonna start where I think I left you anyway. So, my friend, the water bearer, was too ashamed to tell any of his neighbors in the village that the pot was broken. And every day he would return with this water, and they would still greet him like nothing was different. And he would just hang his head and quietly walk away. He wondered why the people were still so happy to see him every day. It was no secret that he wasn't bringing back nearly as much water as he had before, but the people continued to treat him like nothing had changed. So, one day, when he returned from his daily trip, he approached his neighbor on the street and said, "My friend, it is no secret that I am not bringing back nearly as much water as I did before. I am so terribly sorry. One of my pots has sprung a leak, and I've been too ashamed to mention it to anyone. But we all know it, plain as day. So why do you and the others continue to greet me with such love and affection? Are you not angry with me?" His neighbor was shocked to hear this. "Angry with you? Why, of course no one's angry with you. Don't you know what a gift you've given us?" The water bearer was very confused. "Gift? What do you mean, gift?" "Come with me," the neighbor said. "Let me show you something." They walked together back toward the water bearer's route, and as they did, the neighbor said, "We all noticed your pot had sprung a leak some time ago. But it's okay. We don't blame you for that. You work so hard for us every day. We're so grateful to you. We would never blame you or make you feel bad about something you can't control." So we all got together and we planted some seeds along the side of the road. As they approached the roadway, for the very first time, the water bearer noticed the ground on his daily path. Along the side of the road, where the water bearer carried his broken pot every day, flowers had grown as far as the eye could see. Broken as his pot may be, the water bearer still served a beautiful purpose to his community. Just by walking that path every day and with a little help from his friends, without even knowing it, he grew a garden. Now, please enjoy our Dear First Universalist Choir's rendition of Shenandoah, video edited by Tina Wade.
Ocean and I long to see you, and hear your rolling river. Ocean and I long to see you.
I long to see your smiling valley and hear your rolling river. I long to see your smiling valley
Thank you, choir. Thank you for putting words to our longing, putting song to our longing. And thank you, Justin, for that invitation to think about how it feels after we ugly cry. That music and the way that my heart opened is giving me an opportunity to feel how it feels to try not to ugly cry. Oh my God, I miss you all so much. It is so true. I long to see you. We long to see each other. I just had a frantic moment of looking for my Kleenex. I did not find any, so. Oh. So friends, we are moving into this time of prayer, this time of meditation, this time to connect in to what is true for us. So I invite you to slow down. Close your eyes if that's comfortable. You can rest your hands in your lap. If you're holding a device that you are using to connect to worship, you can just put it down. Prayer is a more internal journey. It is so much more about what we hear, what arises in our hearts, than it is about what we're seeing on the screen. And as we come into this time, I invite you to find a way to let your body be a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more relaxed. You can roll your shoulders back, maybe roll your neck a little bit to release a little bit of tension. We often hold tension in our shoulders, in our necks, often our jaws. You can even touch your jaw, the sides of your face a little bit, rub just a little. Yeah, to settle in, because when we allow more space and more aliveness in our bodies, we allow more space and more aliveness in our hearts, in our beings. We relax into more softness. And in that softness, we can connect and reach out. We can reach out with our hearts. We can reach out as we move and breathe together. As we move into this brief moment of shared silence and this shared breath that makes us one. It feels so good to breathe together, to know that right now, several hundred of us are opening our hearts, are breathing together, are making space in our lives for prayer, for meditation, for consideration of what is most important. And so, friends, I invite you to pray with me. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, God of our being and our becoming, that which moves within us and among us and beyond us, which we cannot tame and cannot measure, as the poet writes. Friends, this has been a hard week. This has been a hard week. Curfews and helicopters flying overhead again. The losses in our lives, in our circle of family and friends and loved ones, the losses in our cities, in our state, in our nation, that make it necessary for our siblings to be in the streets, that the state meets with a curfew and helicopters. Jacob Blake shot, handcuffed to his hospital bed while paralyzed. Protesters shot and killed, protesting how he was brutally treated, how he was brutally shot by the police. Joseph Rosenbaum, Anthony Huber, another protester whose name I did not catch, shot in Portland this morning, or last night, rather. Lives cut short. It has been a hard week. The America that has never been but still must be, that dream of a country as yet unreached, the lives taken again and again and again by the ravenous maw of greed and small-mindedness. This has been a hard week. And we show up here. We show up here because here we can give voice to the reality, which is this has been hard. We can hold each other as we mourn, as we grieve. Adrienne Marie Brown said, things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered, and that we must hold each other close as we continue to pull back the veil. But it hurts. This reality hurts. And we hold each other in this pain, in this sadness, as we cry out in lamentation. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, why? Why again? How much is enough? It has already been too much. It has already been too much. Help us. Hold us. Remind us of who we are. Remind us of what we believe. Remind us that no word is the last word, that the future is not written, that we are part of writing it. Help our hearts find ground as we struggle to hold on. As the poet, as the Reverend Teresa Inez Soto writes, we know that there is something moving between us that we cannot tame and cannot measure. We know that when we give ourselves over to the something, we are connected in an instant to a love and a beingness that is so much larger than we can imagine. We know that these experiences are but glimpses, if we have them at all, and yet they sustain us. Sustain us then. Sustain us then, Holy One. Sustain us that we might do the same for others, our faith supporting theirs, their faith supporting others, the circle widening to hold all whose hearts compel them to join. Help us to remember that none of us is alone. This has been a hard week. And so I invite you, friends, as you are moved, to share in the chat box or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts those things that are weighing down your heart, those things that are bringing tears, the sorrows that you would share with us, that we might help hold, knowing that what we hold together lightens everyone's load. There is so much that we are holding. So much uncertainty. The diagnoses of illness, of sickness, the losses, the worries, the fears. And to the sorrows named, I add these prayers from our congregation. Joe Sweet, who had coronary bypass surgery earlier this week. He's healing well, grateful to be alive. He welcomes your cards and well wishes. And we hold member Betsy Bourne and her children Ivy, Pierce, and Sterling, who lost their father, Eric's partner, Liz Olson, to an undiagnosed medical condition on August 10th. Liz was like a step-parent to Ivy, Pierce, and Sterling, and they loved her immensely and missed her dearly. The children would appreciate cards and condolences during this time so they know how much their community cares about them. And it is so hard not to be physically surrounded by their friends right now. And we also hold Eric Burnham as he grieves the loss of his beloved partner. And this morning we hold Mark Letterman and his family in our hearts. Mark's mother, Jean Constance Letterman, died on Wednesday from congestive heart failure at the age of 92. Mark and his brothers and sisters were able to be with her when she passed. And the family appreciates your messages of condolence, love, and support. And so today, to acknowledge the heartache and loss that our dear friends are bearing, and to hold the light in each human heart as sacred, we light a candle in memory of Liz Olson, and we light a candle in memory of Jean Constance Letterman. And we light a final candle in memory of those who have lost their lives. Working, fighting, struggling to create the world that we know could exist and must exist. May their lives and their light shine on in us all. And friends, the cycle of life contains everything. Sorrow, joy, and all points in between. and we will experience them all in this life. And so, right next to these sorrows and joys are the joys that lift our hearts, the joys that make the hard times bearable. And so I invite you to share in the chat those things that are lifting your spirits, those things that are helping you to make it through. Every time we gather like this and share our joys and our sorrows, I see how quickly the joys come. It quickens my spirit. Our ability to bring joy into our hearts, to take pleasure and joy in each other's pleasure and joy. Nature, friends, the ways that we connect with our bodies, the creative ways we are finding to be together. The joy some amongst us are taking at the hints that the season is turning again. Coolness in the morning, the leaves that are developing crisp edges, the bounty of the harvest at this time of year, when nature is overflowing with gifts. Friends, to the joys that you are sharing, I add one more from our congregation, which is that we celebrate. We celebrate with Ann Kay and family as they announce the birth of Ann's second grandchild, Abigail Ann McFarland. Baby and mother are doing well, and Nana Ann is thrilled. And we celebrate with you all. Friends, as we bring our time of prayer to a close, we pray that the grip of addiction be loosened, that the weight of oppression be lightened, that grief be shared, and that joy break through, and that love make every suffering bearable for us all. May it be so, and amen. And please join Sarah Lindsay and Franco Holder in singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart
Good morning. Thank you, Arif, for that beautiful prayer. I also want to thank Rita for bringing these lovely flowers that are behind me today that happen to match my background so beautifully. And I want to dedicate these flowers to Chadwick Boseman, Wakanda Forever. On Tuesday of this week, we had our regular weekly staff meeting, our church staff meeting. Now, the Karen that likes to joke around, the Karen that likes to make up funny names for colleagues, the Karen who is always connecting the dots of ideas, the Karen that is an appropriately optimistic you who makes inappropriate off-the-cuff jokes, did not come to staff meeting that day. She didn't. The Karen that came had been holding on to something that had been eating at her and bubbling up inside of her for weeks. And then boom, an explosion. She exploded and wept uncontrollably about someone at my other job who made a KKK joke that hurt my feelings, hurt my heart, froze my body, and stunned me into complete silence. Now, you know me, I'm never quiet. Not one utterance did I make. The tears and the sounds that I made at the end of that staff meeting were the sounds of love for my colleagues who could hold me and gird me. The tears and sounds that came out of me were like a medley of grief, a poem of loss, a litany for my diminished humanity. This was a lament. This was a lament. This was what many of us call that ugly cry. But friends, for some of us, all we may know about the word lamentations or lament is from the Bible. That amazing book of Lamentations written by the great prophet Jeremiah in the Hebrew scriptures. That may be the only time we've ever even heard the word. It's not a word that's used that often. But the poetry of lamentation is found in all oral traditions, in all languages and all cultures across the globe. It can be found in ancient Egyptian, in Yoruba, in Chinese, in Sanskrit, and in Hindi. A lament has many faces. Yes, it is mourning, but not always about death. Mourning not for a purpose, but an existential wail as primal as the child's need to cry. Throughout human history, from the Australopithecines, the early hominids who lost a baby in childbirth in the Rift Valley, to the children who watched their father being shot in the back seat of a car in Kenosha. Lament is a way of bearing the unbearable, a human need to say no, to say why, to say help. Laments tell the truth of the suffering that is smothering our worthiness, our dreams, and our ability to work towards a better day or a better life or a better future. Naming these horrors in an unrestrained lament helps mold us into a people who respond with an empathic no to the way our nation and our communities are turned into graven images of hatred and despair. Lamenting is healing, and the need for healing is paramount the world over. Therefore, the loss of lament in Western culture is lamentable. I believe that one of the reasons we have trouble lamenting in this country is the imprint of Christian theology on our secular culture. Think about it, friends. It is not fashionable for people to feel and show emotions, particularly here in Minnesota. How often do we see folks apologize when they start to cry, even though they have suffered a great loss, and this is the most natural reaction? Some people even then apologize for apologizing. In our culture, we have come to think of such powerful expressions of grief as unattractive. and therefore we seek to avoid them. Don't want to mess up my makeup. To avoid even seeing them. I better hide over here, like Arif says. Did anybody see me? Much less grieving like this ourselves. We don't want anyone to see it. Eventually, though, friends, idealism about what one is facing, when it doesn't match up with reality, will give way to weariness, trauma, grief, complicated grief, suffering. But there is nothing to be ashamed of concerning sorrow, misery, grief, or lamentation. Now, many of you are UUs because you were dissatisfied with the traditional Christian responses that do not serve those caught in the grip of suffering. They are based on doctrinal constructs that do not correspond, again, with people's real life experiences. This theodicy problem has long been recognized as a dilemma of Christian theology, and especially for Jews, even after the Shoah in Jewish theology. God's authority is asserted with the words omnipotent, omnipresent, all-powerful. This thinking asserts that if something goes wrong, terribly wrong, horribly wrong, deathly wrong, it must be the fault of the sufferer. I'll never forget a mother who came into the hospital. Her son had just been shot, and she said to me, "I know why this happened, chaplain." I said, "Why?" She says, "I haven't been going to church." Blaming the sufferer. So does the all God, all good God allow suffering for whatever reason as a punishment for sin, as a test of faith, as a means to saving others, to impart some moral lesson? This thinking trivializes and justifies the victim's suffering, which causes more harm than aid. Now, we can all nod our heads, but don't get too comfortable, my fellow UUs, shaking your head at the problems and dilemmas of Christian theology. The same problem exists with our secular liberal democracy. Think about it, starting with the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutions. The words do not match up with reality. So, does the all-good, all-knowing democracy allow suffering for whatever reason as a punishment for Blackness? As a test to our patriotism, as a means of saving whiteness, to impart some moral lesson? This thinking also trivializes and justifies the victim's suffering, which causes more harm. How many of you, just for 1 second, when they said that Brother Jacob in Kenosha may have had a knife in his car, but for 1 second went, oh, okay. This thinking trivializes and justifies the victim's suffering, which causes more harm. If people are to move from purely passive endurance of suffering to suffering that can humanize them in a productive way, then one of the things we need to do, friends, one of the things we need is a language that is honest, a language that is relevant, a language that is truthful, and is born of real experience. Here's a great example. 1,000 years ago, women from Hunan province in central China were denied literacy and imprisoned by feet bound to the size of 3 inches from their 7th year. They fought back, though, and took revenge by inventing a secret written language, incomprehensible to men, called Nushu. This female language, now on the verge of extinction, was only recently discovered, having their lives placed in this language. These Chinese women felt a desperate need for their own language in which to protest and bewail their situation in support of each other. Today, the access to this language is in the form of an ancient traditional poetry that has recently been documented. and published. This literature was a way for these women to bear the unbearable through a self-defined language of lament. In this community, lament was both communal and private. It spoke with political, social, and religious voices. It calls on spiritual entities and higher powers to be accountable. And at the same time, it calls upon them for aid and relief. It accuses them and praises them. It is deeply spiritual as well as subversive and political. Lamentation then is about release, about letting the painful emotions flow, letting fear fly free, letting doubt invade your thoughts, letting bewilderment puzzle you, letting anger absorb you, and letting shame and guilt shatter you, and most of all, let sadness in. During that staff meeting, the release of energy was accompanied by my noises, the sounds of crying, shouting, sobbing, kneeing, sighing, whimpering, and the fall of tears, even the streaming of mucus. Resisting difficult emotions is often our default position. It's not easy to endure those feelings, let alone welcome them. I know it's hard to allow ourselves to feel the hurt. But if we ignore the lament, friends, we displace the resulting serenity of understanding and acceptance when we eventually assimilate our losses into ourselves, assimilate our lament into our spirit, and embody that awful pain with self-compassion and right actions. Before we step out in strength with determination to fight for justice or an emotion or seek an emotional equilibrium to our bad days, we must allow and create space for our pain and our tears. For it's in these places that we find true strength to bear the unbearable. When we let lament flow its natural course down the river of our bodies, we ready ourselves to engage with life anew and move forward. Without lamentation, without the emotional healing, this process cannot advance towards resolution. It cannot happen, in which case misery can only persist. UUs avoid lamenting. The absence of lament in our liturgy of UU churches results in the loss of our memory. We forget the reality of suffering and pain and go too quickly to indignation and moral outrage. Friends, we are in a time of an environmental crisis, displaced people, war, exile, abuse, fear, poverty, uprising, hatred, all coated with depression and anxiety. We cannot approach these concerns with just our held values and our pristine beliefs. Sorry, we can't. Any theological reflection that observes the suffering of the have-nots, those people, my neighbors down the street, that result in you calling Black people to see how they are doing after another visual of their degraded humanity has been plastered across your television, that does not include your lament, is a phone call you do not need to make. Don't call me and ask me how I am. Your call to me minimizes the onslaught of being hunted like an animal every day. Lament with me. Lament with me. The triumphalism of the haves that place a Black Lives Matter sticker on their Facebook page is too neat and tidy for the power of my cries. Lament with me. Lament with me. Any theology of hope and celebration is incomplete and inhuman. Lament with me. Lamenting is risky speech. Or as the great Protestant theologian Walter Brueggemann says, lamenting is dangerous, restless speech. Dangerous, restless speech. Friends, when our tears become ideas and our emotions become political, Lamentation can become dangerous, powerful, provocative, a tool because it challenges power structures. It calls for justice. It pushes the boundaries of our relationship with each other and our spirits to the very limits of what we can believe can exist. Lamentations makes us refuse to settle for the status quo, reminding us and the powers that be that this human situation is unacceptable and that we must act. Laments are irreversible when spoken. It is done and cannot be recalled. It takes risk because one never knows until the act is done whether one has gone too far. Now, there's an ancient Hebrew ritual of lament that includes the tearing of one's clothes. The tearing of one's clothes, ripping them off and saying no more. The tearing of one's clothes. And then people would put on a sackcloth made of goat hair, the itchiness to remind them of the pain. I tear my clothes and I put on my sackcloth made of burlap from Michael's. But I say, let us read the first chapter of Lamentations. And it goes like this. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears are upon her cheeks. Among all her lovers, there is no one to comfort her. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. After affliction and harsh labor, Judah has gone into exile. She dwells among the nations. She finds no resting place. All who pursue her have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her appointed feast. All her gateways are desolate. Her priests groan, her maidens grieve, and she is in bitter anguish. Blessed be. Amen and Ashe. Our offering today is a 50-50 split between the Ministers Emergency Fund and First Universalist Church. We ask you to give generously as we listen to Franco lead us in the song that you may sing along with, We Are in a Holy Place. Our closing words today are simple. Walk towards the pain you've avoided. Be girded up on the right side of you by family and friends. And if they are not around, make some new ones. Be girded up on the other side by our faith, by our church, by our beliefs, by our values, and by our guts. And from behind, as you walk towards that pain, know that the winds of change are coming. They always are. We just have to go with the wind and keep moving. And now we will sing Go Now in Peace. I want to also just share a little bit before we extinguish our chalice. Years ago when I was in college, there were a lot of frustrations about being in your 20s. And my friends and I went to the thrift shop and we bought a set of dishes. And these dishes were just for one thing, for expressing our anger. And so we had a little place in the basement, all corded off. We could go down there, we could take those dishes that we got from the thrift shop for 10 cents and throw them against the brick wall. So if you need to do that, you have our permission to break something, scream about something, release something, let it out. Believe me, I'm talking because it's been hella hard for me to do all my life. So join us in lamenting this week. Break something, scream. Wakanda forever. Let us extinguish the flame. Let us extinguish the flame. And now let us carry the flame everywhere we go, to all that we meet, to all that we cry with. Let us carry that flame of love and of hope and of lament. Blessed be and amen. Have a great day.